I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time. Happy New Year and welcome to our January 14th special meeting of Municipal Council, which I will call to order now. Are there any declarations of interest from members of Council? Not seeing any, I will share our land acknowledgement statement. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the lands originally used and occupied by the first peoples of the Williams Treaties First Nation and other Indigenous peoples. And on behalf of Council, I thank them for sharing this land. We also acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as East Gwillimbury's closest First Nation community and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and the waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and we join them in these responsibilities. We are at item D on our deputations. We have a deputation on our agenda this morning, and before we begin, I share that 5 minutes has been allotted on the agenda for this deputation. I also want to remind everyone in attendance that while we recognize some individuals may be passionate about the issues, we ask that you remain courteous and respectful during the meeting. Outbursts, cheering, and clapping will not be tolerated. And with that, I would invite Jay Gamble, making a deputation to Council regarding item E1, Integrity Commissioner Presentation, Proposed Update Town of East Gwillimbury Council / Committee Code of Conduct. Welcome. Good to have you with us today.
Good morning, Madam Mayor.
Morning.
Councillors, I don't see the Ethics or Integrity Commissioner here. Oh. Wrong glasses. Good morning. And certainly welcome. This is truly an auspicious occasion, as my deputation is about ethics, integrity, and transparency. I and many other residents have struggled for a long time to have our voices truly paid attention to versus experiencing what appears to be mere lip service. May I present a few samples? Redacted official videos. The town has on 2 occasions that we know of redacted council videos. Additionally, the town clerk has denied my request for copies, stating they are not official records, contrary to the RSO 1990C M56 and the MFI PPA Section 2 records. I subsequently filed a Freedom of Information request on January the 9th for copies of the unredacted videos. It is my contention that they will show, contrary to the above acts, the town has modified at least 2 council videos by either muting, deleting, or failing to fully record the council sessions in question. The applicable regulations are quite specific in that any form of recording, be it written, electronic, audio, video, etc., is an official record and must reflect the actions at that time without comment or modification. In short, the facts must be recorded as they occur. In the first video, October 5th, 2023, Budget 2024, Councillor Johns uttered an unparliamentary expletive, which I won't bother repeating at the moment, which was subsequently muted on the official town video as part of a comment about 2 other councillors voting no against a motion to accept the budget. It appears that approximately 40 minutes after a break, a new vote was called, and 2 of the 3 dissenting votes were changed to yes. A newly disclosed independent audio video has recently surfaced and has been audio enhanced to recover the muted expletive. In the case of the second video, November 19th, 2024, Tree Protection Bylaw, Councillor Crone erupted when a deputant called into question his chairing of the committee. The published town video redacted or failed to report the outburst and went to break. This question arose due to his family-owned tree farm and his frequent social media posts. Also, he laughingly remarked at a council meeting, perhaps he should have declared a conflict of interest, which at least indicates some doubt in his own mind. While the decision as to a conflict of interest rests solely in the hands of the Integrity Commissioner, the question of appearance of conflict does exist. We can only hope that my request for the unredacted videos will be forthcoming and the true and complete record will be available. On the matter of agendas, are generally organized to include resolving to accept council's proposed actions, be it a bylaw, a budget, etc., at the same time as the meeting deputations/petitions are submitted. This clearly sends a message that the decisions were predetermined and the resident presentations are unwanted, summarily ignored, and nothing but a sham. This is particularly egregious where the majority of the deputations are against. One of the most recent examples of this practice is at the November 19th, 2024 council meeting, despite having received numerous deputations and over 200 additional petitions opposing the bylaw, Councillor Johns indicates the petitions have to be redacted prior to being received. The mayor says she suspects they can return to the petitions later in the meeting. No further action was taken. The following link, which I put in here, shows deputations from residents, including myself, indicating not only dissent, but the illegal nature of the bylaw. Tree bylaw petitions, and that is a link. Council nonetheless proceeded to resolve and pass this highly contentious bylaw. This clearly indicates a foregone conclusion, ignoring residents' disapproval. Well, I do have a couple of more issues, namely closed meetings, to which the residents have no access whatsoever, and a previously delayed Freedom of Information request. However, time does not permit fleshing out these issues at the moment. As such, my ethics complaint to the Integrity Commissioner and to the Ontario Ombudsman will have to address these issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I assume there's no questions.
I will ask, are there any questions at this time? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm moving it.
Thank you.
You asked for a mover.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? I'm not seeing a seconder at this time. Madam Clerk, is there any suggestions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if a motion does not fulfill the requirement of a seconder, it is not being entertained by members of council. You have an opportunity to proceed with the balance of your agenda.
Thank you very much. We would be at item E, is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct. That would be item E, which is the workshop heading under today's agenda.
Thank you. I'm pleased to welcome our Integrity Commissioner, Suzanne Craig, to our meeting this morning to provide a presentation entitled A Proposed Update Town of East Gwillimbury Council/Committee Code of Contact. General Manager Ingram, I understand you will introduce the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, it's my pleasure to introduce Suzanne Craig, our Integrity Commissioner. This is an important day. Ms. Craig is here to about the updated Code of Conduct that she has been working on with us to update the current Code of Conduct, which could benefit from her expertise and her experience in the field. And so today, this is an opportunity for our council to familiarize themselves with some of the changes that she's recommending to the Council Code of Conduct, and to ask any questions and gather any clarity if any of those updates that she's recommending are unclear to them. So with that, I introduce Ms. Craig for reasons that will make an easier flow of information and dialogue here. Ms. Craig will be sitting at the table to my right, and I hope you enjoy your workshop this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Mayor, and to Council, and to everyone in the room. I have asked to be seated because I feel I'd like to have it a little informal. I mean, we're dealing with a very serious topic, but I feel that I am proclaiming from on high, standing before you, so I've chosen to sit. I hope that's acceptable to you. Also, by way of a little bit of an apology, I forgot my glasses today, so I have staff who were kind enough to help me with this screen before me, and it's magnified to as big as it can be so that I can see my speaking notes. I'm pretty clear on what I will be saying today, but if I stumble or if I squint, it is not because I am taking issue with your question, it's because I can't see. So without further ado, I want to thank you all for being here this morning. Madam Mayor, members of council, members of the public, it's important to have you here. Members of staff, it's my pleasure. My name is Suzanne Craig. I will just give a little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. I've been doing this for about 20 years now. I started off at the City of Toronto working with the first Municipal Integrity Commissioner, Professor David Mullen, and I helped him as he started up the office at the City of Toronto. And since then, I've worked for over 30 municipalities as Integrity Commissioner, Lobbyist Registrar, Closed Meeting Investigator, and I do believe that I have my finger on the pulse. I started an organization several years ago with other integrity commissioners to just look at how trends were changing accountability at the municipal level in Ontario. So I'm going to take a little bit of time today to provide an overview of what I am proposing to Council as updates to the current code. I don't think this is going to take very long because I have provided you, members of council, with my proposed updates. I believe that you've taken a look at these updates. And so I'm going to ask for staff to kindly move the presentation forward. So what am I going to be covering today? I'm going to start with talking about why we're here. Why am I proposing updates to the current Code of Conduct? I'm also going to be talking about what these code rules mean for members of council. This is not a staff draft. While I have vetted this with your staff because there are other policies that intersect with the Code of Conduct, this is your code. I came to your municipality, I took a look at your code, I saw that there were gaps based on best practices in codes of conduct at the municipal level. I took a look at other codes of conduct. I took a look at what the Ombudsman of Ontario has recommended be included in codes of conduct, and I went to work, and I have spoken to your staff. But to be very clear, this is my work that I'm bringing to you, and I look forward to hearing your comments on this because this is your code. The proposed updates to the code govern individual members of council. So I did listen a little bit to the deputation, and for those of you who don't know me, I am very much based in law, but I also listen. I listen to members of the public, I listen to staff, I listen to the council members who I report to collectively, and I think today's overview will shed some light on what my responsibilities are and why I've proposed some of the updates, and what my responsibilities are not. I think what's really important in an accountability regime at any municipality is to ensure that individual members of the public, individual members of council, and staff members know where to bring issues, because members of council serve the public, and if it is not to the integrity commissioner, well, then where do grievances go? And so I think this update will really clarify for many why sometimes an integrity commissioner will not receive a code complaint, and where a code complaint or an issue is most appropriately addressed. I look at members of council, and this is not my first time coming before this council, and I know that when you come to this esteemed dais, you have your perspectives. You've been on volunteer organizations, not-for-profits. You have different perspectives. Some of you have been here for a very long time, and some for less. So the code of conduct has to be a document that espouses your values. While there are best practices in Ontario that deal with integrity and ethics for members of council, if this code doesn't make sense to all of you, then it makes no sense to have it. And so that's why I thought that it would be a good idea to make the proposed submissions to you, give you some time to take a look at these proposed updates, then come with a workshop overview before the public so the public can hear what I am saying to you, and then get your feedback, if any, from what we are hearing today, and then I will finalize and submit to council, and your code will go into force. So codes of conduct play an important role, and again, we're still looking at what I'll be covering today. And anyone who's looked at my presentation, many people, when I submit a code report, they go straight to the back page because they want to see what I've determined. So if you look at the last page of my presentation, it actually has the pith of today's presentation, which is where I have seen substantive changes needed. And so you might ask, well, so why do we have all of these pages before the last page, Madam Integrity Commissioner? And it's because you have to know why. It's very easy for me to go through each of my proposed changes. I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm an expert in the field. I've been an expert witness in many judicial inquiries. But this is your code. And so I am taking a significant amount of time, maybe more time than many in this room think, to explain the why. Why are we here today? Why are there codes of conduct? And what does this mean for you? And what does this mean for your public holding you accountable? Codes of conduct play an important role, not in preventing members of council from speaking the truth. There's a lot of talk, and again, I point out that I have served on over 30 municipal organizations, 2 school boards. So when I talk today and provide you anecdotal information, it's not about East Gwillimbury. It's about what I hear as Integrity Commissioner across Ontario: Richmond Hill, Barrie, Vaughan, Muskoka, Gravenhurst, Bracebridge, Oakville, Halton Region, Ottawa-Carleton District School Board, York Region District School Board. This is not braggadocious. This is me telling you that there are organizations out there with whom I work and with whom I listen to hear what do people want in their codes. And so the code of conduct does not prevent your members of council. It does not prevent you from speaking the truth. It does not prevent you from speaking. It does not muzzle you or silence you. I look at the trends in best practices in municipal governance, and independently, I am bringing you forward these updates. I'll conclude today's session, as you see in what will be covered today, with that last page, which will point out high level what I'm recommending as proposed updates to your code. Next slide, please. So why do we need codes of conduct and why do we need integrity commissioners? You know, I've heard many people say that an integrity commissioner is just a really expensive burden on taxpayers. In government, whether at the federal, provincial, municipal level, the decisions that elected officials make touch every aspect of our lives. Federally, provincially, municipally, there isn't anything that's relevant to us and to our families that members of council or members of the ledge or members of parliament don't do. So it's very important to be able to know that once they've sworn that oath of office, there are rules that have to be followed, because whether it is 3 years or 4 years in the case of municipalities in Ontario, every 4 years, there is a period of time within which the province has said, and hence there are codes of conduct, the public gets to keep watch over the work of the members of council. And so what happens when members of council at any municipality in Ontario don't follow the rules? Codes of conduct at the municipal level are rules that members of council agree to abide by as they carry out their public duties, and members of council have an enforcement mechanism, so where a member of staff, a member of the public feels that they have not met that threshold of compliance, there's a process that is clear, that is fair, that allows for natural justice, that allows for transparency, with a third-party objective individual who has experience in this area, who will be able to investigate the concern brought forward and then bring back the investigation findings to council, and council as a whole will review her findings and will make a determination on one of their own. In essence, the Code of Conduct is holding up a document from council to the public saying, this is what we espouse. When we were elected, we held up our hands and we said, I am taking an oath of office. Some people may say, but what happens in those 4 years? A code of conduct was created by the province to say, in those 4 years, where an individual feels not so much, there is a process that is transparent and open that can be followed, where a member of the public, a staff person, or another member of council may say, I disagree, I'd like to see if this person has fallen short of their obligation. So it's really important that the rules of a code of conduct are understood by the members of council. From helping organizations in the community, developing and encouraging business. As I was driving here, I saw many new developments. It's beautiful in the winter, it's beautiful in the summer. But where do we have the disconnect from helping the community, working on development, helping transportation and traffic and gridlock, and what actually caused the province to decide to change the Municipal Act and actually create codes of conduct? I'm sure we're not going to want to listen to me talking about all of the scandals that we've seen over the years since the genesis of codes of conduct. But one of the reasons that, remember, I said at the beginning of this, why am I going through all of this and not just talking about the code, is because the province did steps towards encouraging municipalities to have codes of conduct to hold members of council accountable. This first happened at the City of Toronto, where a member of council was too close to an RFP, which purchased computers for the municipality, and the quid pro quo is that he would decide to lend his support to the particular RFP and also would receive personal benefit in the sense that he would have political junkets. He would go to get leaf tickets, boxes, and all of this became fodder for the first inquiry at the municipal level, which was the MFP inquiry. And that's where the province, because municipalities are creatures of the province created the Municipal Act, and the Municipal Act created all of the municipalities, where the province said, hold on a second, we need to pay closer attention to what's going on. Let me just put a caveat in there that with all the years and all the elected officials I've worked with, I can count those who I've investigated, who I have found have breached their obligations in an egregious way, whether through harassment or conflict of interest, or in this case, personal gain while in office. I can count those members of council on my hands. So multiply the number of municipalities where I have been an integrity commissioner and other accountability officers, and how many investigations I've done. I should be able to say, listen, there are 444 municipalities out there times 7 members of council or 12 members of council. There are a whole bunch of elected officials, and there are like 300 of them that I've found that have breached the code. I have not, and many of my colleagues have not, because based on my experience, most members of council are in it for the right reasons. And the code of conduct is the blueprint for members of council to ensure that they stay on the right track. And your job and staff's job and collectively members of council's job is to ensure that those rules are clear and understood so they can be held accountable. Because I can't hold accountable members of council that have vague rules. And I can't be the decision maker based on what I think. So even I have to be held to a standard, because the rules that I use have to be clear and based on procedural fairness, what the courts say that my role is. I can't go beyond what the Municipal Act says an integrity commissioner does, because then it becomes Suzanne Craig thinks this, and that's not why I've been retained by the municipality. So whether it's the MFP inquiry at the City of Toronto, whether it's the Mississauga inquiry with the former Mayor McCallion, whether it is the Collingwood inquiry where the town of Collingwood had unfortunately some interconnectivity between the mayor and the purchase of a utility where there were conflicts of interest, we've gone from seeing municipalities and members of council understanding what their role is to members of council actually being involved in scandals. So why do we have codes of conduct? The Bellamy inquiry, the Mississauga inquiry, the Morocco Collingwood inquiry, and so many more have said there needs to be oversight. Next slide, please. So what am I giving as my reasons for the proposed changes to the code? Well, firstly, I've made these changes and proposed and submitted to council because I'm looking at councils before this one, and including this one, who've adopted over the last decade high standards that they hold themselves to. And I want to make sure that these standards that they espouse are actually tangible. So if the values are embedded in the code, it's clear what steps they must take and what steps they cannot take in order to be in alignment with the code. So I've given clarification in the updates that I've provided to council. Secondly, I've provided the updates because the province has actually said through the updates to the Municipal Act, hey, wait a minute, the Integrity Commissioner can also receive complaints that allege contraventions of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. I'll say MCIA because we use acronyms all the time, and it's a mouthful to say Municipal Conflict of Interest Act all the time. But in 2019, integrity commissioners were given the authority to investigate when a member of council perhaps has a pecuniary interest that they did not declare. So there are two streams. Prior to 2019, the province said, if you believe that a member of council had a pecuniary interest and they didn't declare it, you go to court. So that burden was borne by an elector, An elector would have to bring an application to court, and they would have to bring all of their evidence and likely hire a lawyer. And that was a bit of an impediment to holding members accountable. 2019, the amendment to the Municipal Act, integrity commissioners can now receive and review expeditiously whether or not a member of council has breached the MCIA. So there are two streams. An elector can take one or the other or both. That's not in the code right now. There is high-level discussion about MCIA and conflicts of interest, but I want to make sure that if anyone brings forward a code complaint alleging a pecuniary interest that was not declared, which is a serious allegation, and something that all members of council in my one-on-ones with them when I was first retained as integrity commissioner told me that they take very seriously, then I want to make sure that it's right in your code, because I don't want to be able to receive code complaints and then say, the code doesn't actually address that. I cannot investigate a code complaint or MCIA complaint unless your code says that that's your obligation. So that's the second reason. There are many amendments to the Municipal Act that have not been enshrined in the current code, and so I've provided these updates. And the third reason is there are best practices out there. So the first integrity commissioner was appointed in 2006, David Mullen, as I said, at the City of Toronto. Since then, many people from former and may he rest in peace, Mayor Ford, to so many others, have had judicial reviews of integrity commissioners' decisions, because integrity commissioners were brought on board, they've investigated members of council, and some people have said, well, I don't agree with that. I actually think you got it wrong. And so the right of appeal, which is to go to court to say, I think the integrity commissioner got it wrong in law. I think the integrity commissioner didn't afford procedural fairness. I think she just plain didn't listen to me. So over the years, the courts have looked at decisions of integrity commissioners, and the courts have said, well, yeah, you got it right here, but. You got it wrong here, but. And so what that's created for integrity commissioners is a body of jurisprudence. It's our rules. So we look at what the courts have said, and we get together, you know, loosely once every couple of months, and we say, let's see what the courts have said. So the third reason that I'm bringing proposed updates to this council is because there's a body of jurisprudence out there where courts have said, this is what you should have in your code of conduct. The Ombudsman of Ontario has said, this is what you should have in your codes of conduct and the type of code protocol you should have. Many of the integrity commissioners out there, esteemed lawyers who've been working on this for years, have said, this is what you should have in a code of conduct. So I've taken all of that, including the work that I've done, and I've looked at your current code, and I've said, this is what you need to have in a code of conduct, because the province has mandated it, because judicial reviews have recommended it, because courts have stated it. And so what I am recommending is not what I think, it's what the province is required, it's what judicial reviews of courts have recommended, and judicial inquiries of Justice Bellamy, Cunningham, Morocco, and others. So these are the reasons why I'm saying it's time for a refresh. And it's time for a refresh based on clarity. So everyone is clear on what you should and should not do. And outside of the codes of conduct rules, it's not my jurisdiction. So it may be a closed meeting issue. It may be a court issue. It may be a freedom of information and protection of privacy issue. It may be a procedural issue. And as ethics officer, if these come to my attention and we have a clear code that says what you are responsible for under your code of ethics, then I will be able to say to whomever brings a complaint, this is an MFIPA issue. This is a closed meeting issue. Madam Clerk, I'd like to speak to you about working on a protocol that intersects between the code and election rules because there's an election coming up. Social media is a new area of communicating with the public. I think we need some rules in the code that deal with how members of of council communicate with the public on social media, because respect, prohibition of harassment, conflict of interest is through any medium. It's not just when they sit at the dais. And so for these reasons, I've brought forward these proposals and these updates. Next slide, please. So the code applies to all members of council and all of your local boards and your committees. So I think it's really important, and I have spoken to your staff, that everyone understand what local boards and what committees are governed by the Municipal Act. So if you have ad hoc committees, if you have standing committees, that all of those members of council and citizen members understand that they are captured by the code, so that has to be in your code. Because the Municipal Act was changed in 2019 to say codes of conduct for members of council and local boards. So if these members of local boards are governed by the code, they need to know that, and they need to be trained on that, and they need to have information given to them so that they know what those rules are. And they have to understand that if you put your name forward, you're going to be bound by the same rules as the members of council. All of that has to come up front, because what I don't want is to have a citizen member who wants to participate in the governance of their municipality and then all of a sudden say, I didn't know that I had to do this. So it's important that this is included in the code, so when there is this engagement with the community knows, I'm still a member of the public. I'm bringing my information to the municipality, but now there's some rules that I have to follow, and those rules are embedded in the code. It's about transparency, it's about clarity. There is a regulation to the Municipal Act. I wish I could say my dog ate it, but it's just, this is how much I care about what I do, because I read this all the time. And it's almost like anyone's, I don't want to get into it, but anyone's sacred book. You read it, and you read it over, and you read it over, because each time it means something different. And so Regulation 5518 to the Municipal Act actually says codes of conduct are mandatory, integrity commissioners are mandatory, but you only have to include 4 things: gifts and benefits and hospitality, respectful conduct, confidential information, and use of property. That's been a problem, and that's one of the reasons why I have recommended there be proposed updates, because your current code of conduct is thin. It's got those 4 mandatory areas. It doesn't have anything else of substance to be able to guide members of council in ethical conduct. And so I've taken a look at, again, what other integrity commissioners and judges have said, and I've said, listen, here are some of the recommended inclusions in codes of conduct. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go through the history, again, to clearly set out for you why there are codes of conduct and how did we get to the point where we are right now. So very briefly, in 2006, almost 20 years ago, so this has been going on for a while, the province amended the Municipal Act, allowing municipalities, allowing, not mandating, allowing, saying, you know, it's a good idea. You saw what happened at the City of Toronto. You saw what happened with the MFP inquiry. They must have codes of conduct. They, City of Toronto, must have integrity commissioners. The rest of the 400-odd municipalities in Ontario, you might want to have a code of conduct. And guess what? Many said, no, I don't think so. So the former Ombudsman of Ontario, you can take a look at history and some of what's out there, was a very colorful individual. He was I think he was general counsel for the RCMP for a while, so he was a no-nonsense guy. But he also used to write reports that were kind of tough on people. So when this first bill came into place, when the province said, okay, there have to be codes of conduct, the then Ombudsman of Ontario said, and I'm quoting because, you can't get a flavor unless you actually hear what he said. He said, the general problem with Bill 130, that was the first sort of dive into there have to be codes of conduct. The general problem with Bill 130's ombudsmanry provisions is that they provide legislative authority to create toothless oversight. Toothless oversight. Unless amendments are made to this legislation, there will be municipalities who take up its invitation to have integrity commissioners and codes of conduct, to use the goodwill and the name of ombudsman, him, to create and operate what will be enfeebled and ineffective offices. And I'm not disagreeing with that, because if there's a requirement to have codes of conduct and a requirement to have an integrity commissioner, but the integrity commissioner can't do this, can't do this, can't do that, the code doesn't cover this, doesn't cover this, doesn't cover that, then really I come in here and say, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to tell you that I can do nothing. And so it was harsh, but the then Ombudsman of Ontario was speaking truth. In 2019, after hearing concerns, Bill 68 was passed, which required each municipality to have a code of conduct. So they went from you should have a code of conduct to you must have a code of conduct, and the code of conduct must have this, 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 and this. So we're moving forward, but not terribly well, because again, only the City of Toronto had to have an ombudsman. Lobbyist registrars were included, but there was no mandate for the other municipalities, and there was no mandate for an auditor general. So if you're looking at the accountability regime in municipalities, going back to when codes of conduct were first brought in, there was integrity commissioner, lobbyist registrar, ombudsperson, and auditor general, because financially, auditor general, systemic issues, ombudsman, working with lobbyists, lobbyist registrar, and working with members of council, integrity commissioner. The province envisioned an accountability regime where members of the public and members of staff and members of council could all say, something's going on here, here's where you deal with it, here's where you deal with it, here's where you deal with it. Well, what's happening now, and has happened for many years, is many people have come to the Integrity Commissioner. My name and the names of my colleagues are up on the website, and codes are kind of, some of them are detailed and some of them aren't. And what happens is people bring complaints, and the Integrity Commissioner looks at the code and says, I'm sorry, but this isn't on its face a complaint that I can receive and investigate. And people go away and say, sham. There's no oversight here. There's no accountability here. What are we even doing? So in order to address the real concerns of the public, but also to ensure that I am not window dressing, we have to have a robust code. A code that actually means something, and that's what I'm proposing to your council today. Closed meeting complaints, enforcement and interpretation of procedural bylaws, the decisions of council as a whole, the decisions of staff, whether it be bylaw, whether it be planning, these are not issues that the Integrity Commissioner is mandated to review. And so coupled with a clear and concise code is the importance of having clear and concise policies and information. Years and years ago, I was Executive Director for Access and Privacy at the City of Toronto. And what many people wondered was, how do we get information from the municipality? Well, the municipality and all municipalities in Ontario have an obligation to keep confidential law enforcement information, personal information, health information. So the best way to let people know that there isn't secrecy and protection of what should be given to the public is to have clear, open data rules. And so a companion to the Code of Conduct is commentary, which I have proposed in the future for the East Gwillimbury Code of Conduct. So where there is a, this is not the responsibility of the Integrity Commissioner, but here's where you go. And this is what you do. And why I spoke to your staff, members of council, is because I wanted to be able to understand your municipality. So where there was an issue that I could not deal with, I understood your policies, and I would be able to direct whomever came to my office to the appropriate member of staff or provincial body to address what has to happen. The Ombudsman of Ontario has several really good documents out there that says, here's what an Office of the Integrity Commissioner should do. Don't leave people hanging. If it's not your responsibility, let them know where they should go. And I fully agree with that, and that's one of the things that I have tried to incorporate in the proposed updates. Next slide, please. So here, we're still talking about the history, and I promised that I said I'd only talk for an hour and then I would take questions. So I'm on course for that, and when you make a promise, you keep it. Bill 8. Of the many provisions brought forward by Bill 8, one of the major significant changes was that the Ombudsman of Ontario was given oversight over accountability officers. So what happened? There was more power given to accountability officers, more power given to the Integrity Commissioner, but then people said, well, hold on, who's looking at the Integrity Commissioner? I personally have always felt someone should, because if I'm going to hold elected officials accountable, then somebody should be holding me accountable. And so what the province of Ontario decided was they said, well, Ombudsman, you're going to hold integrity commissioners accountable. So if somebody feels they don't have the desire or the resources to go to court because they think the integrity commissioner was wrong, we'd like you to take a look. So I have had some complaints to the Ombudsman of Ontario, and I am fully transparent. And what the Ombudsman of Ontario has said several times, based on his powers under Bill 8, is, well, you know what you might want to do? When you don't receive a complaint, the Code of Conduct protocol should tell people that they will get reasons from you. It can't just be up to you if you feel like it. I'll tell you why I didn't take your complaint or not. And so many of the recommendations of the Ombudsman that came from his oversight of integrity commissioners, I've tried to include in the proposed updates to the code, so that not only are you clear on what your obligations are, but I am clear on what my obligations to you are if I'm not investigating or if I am investigating, and what my obligations to the public are to let you know why I'm not investigating. And let's remember, codes of conduct are fluid documents, so they're not stuck in time. So the updates that I'm proposing here, there may be changes to provincial legislation in a year. I think there might be, as Minister Calandra has said he'd like to see. And so this is not the end. This is not static, but this is bringing your code up to a level where it should have been and should be. Next slide, please. And Bill 68, integrity commissioners were given enhanced jurisdiction, as I said, to investigate MCIA complaints. And there was a mandatory requirement for integrity commissioners and codes of conduct. So that's the full circle. We went from it's a good idea to you should have it to you must have it to here's what's got to be in the code of conduct. And where we are today is the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing saying, need it tougher. So memo went out in December to all municipalities. There's a member's bill in the ledge. They'd like to expand the rules of codes of conduct to not just have the integrity commissioner investigate and make recommendations to council, but to make recommendations for egregious breaches of ethics. Egregious breaches similar to what happened in Ottawa with harassment of staff to the point of incredulity that a member of council would feel that their power and their authority as a member of council would allow them to harass staff to that extent. In those types of situations, this is where the ledge is saying, we need your input because there might be a need for those really specific, egregious cases for the integrity commissioner to be able to go to court and to a panel at the province to say, I'm recommending not only that this member be found to have breached the code, but I'm recommending that this member be removed from office. That's a very sensitive issue because the voice of the people is council, and the voice of the people every 4 years speaks. what this bill is saying is, in between, there may be cases where things get so bad that there are going to be two levels. Council will take the recommendation of the Integrity Commissioner, and then a panel at the province will take the recommendations and come back and say, yes, I think they breached, and with a unanimous vote, Council will be able to unseat a member of Council. Now, will that happen? Don't know, but we'll see. So it's come full circle. Next slide, please. So the Municipal Act has several specific provisions with the various actors. There is council, there is the mayor, there are the staff, which are clerks, solicitors, and other CAO that are statutory officers. And it's important that the Code of Conduct recognizes the obligation for members of council to respect the professional expertise of staff, especially those staff that are also governed by their own regulatory bodies, like the solicitor, like the clerk, like the CAO, like the fire chief, like the chief building official. These are individuals that don't only work and recommend to members of council, but they also have their own ethical obligations beyond them as people to be able to keep their licenses and practice their crafts. And so the Code of Conduct has to ensure that members of council are free to ask questions, but they are not free to undermine the professional authority of these members of staff. Next slide, please. So what is the role of an individual member of council? Well, this has been the bane of existence of many members of council for a very long time, because there is no statutory role of an individual member of council in the Municipal Act. And that's why it's really important to ensure that when policies of the municipality are being drafted and codes of conduct, which is a policy of the municipality, is being drafted, that people recognize that the municipality can only do what the municipality has power to do. So while an elected official comes with their voice to the dais collectively to work on behalf of the public, an individual member of council has no authority to act unilaterally. That's what the Municipal Act says. And so it's important that the Code of Conduct provides a guide to complex issues. So members of council, passionate about what they believe in, passionate about bringing the voices of the public to the debates, but a member of council cannot decide what council will do. Council works as a whole. And the code, in between the statutory roles, has to be in place to be able to say if an individual member of council is giving preferential treatment to one or a group and not taking into consideration the best interest of all of your jurisdiction, the code says that's not allowed. Why? Because the courts say so, but also because there is no role for an individual councillor in statute. So I'm here because the Municipal Act says, here's what an integrity commissioner is. Council is here because the Municipal Act says, here's what council is. The mayor is here because it says, here's what a mayor is. The solicitor, the clerk, and many others are in the Municipal Act. What's not in the Municipal Act? The role of an individual member of council. So when an individual member of council takes it upon his or herself to act outside of the collective, they don't have a role. And that's not my interpretation. That's what the law says. And I've often said to people, say, well, I don't like that law. Well, you have a prerogative to not like laws, and there are ways to change laws. But what I can't do as a statutory officer is just change the law because people don't like it. And what members of council cannot do, as passionate as they may be, is work outside of the statutory rules. And the code is in place to say when you do, doesn't matter what the intention is, you can't do it. And that's why often people say, well, you know, an integrity commissioner works for council, of course she's gonna. No, the integrity commissioner is a statutory officer. And many integrity commissioners are also lawyers. So what they can't do, what we cannot do, is make stuff up. because we will be held accountable. Okay? So I am all for the voice of the public coming to your representatives. I'm all for clarity in where to bring your grievances. And I'm all for holding each and every one of these members accountable with clear and identifiable rules on what their expectations are to you and to the staff and to one another. So this is what this code is about, clarity. And this is what I'm asking for all members of council. Let's be really clear on what we're asking. And what we can't ask is what you don't have authority to ask. Sometimes when people are saying, well, where do we have guidance for councillors? Well, the Councillor's Guide, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing puts out a guide, I think every, I want to say every 4 years, but it's not updated that many times. But the Councillor's Guide, and you can read it online, members of council have been told that they can take a look online, states that a councillor who has made promises, and I'm quoting from the online guide, a councillor who has made promises that they cannot and should not offer to keep may lose credibility with the public and strain their working relationship with fellow members of council and staff. That is why it is important that an individual councillor remembers that she or he represents the municipality of East Gwillimbury. Not just the people who voted for you, not just the people who hold your political views, not just the people who you go and have coffee with, people who have ideas that may be different from yours. They have a right to be heard. People who may belong to a different party than yours. They have a right to be heard because each elected member on that dais represents all views. And it is your responsibility to bring your perspectives, but the Councillor's Guide at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing says your role is to not make promises you can't keep. Because you have to work, once you go from being a candidate to a member of council, that's why I don't call you candidate so-and-so, I call you councillor or mayor, because you are now part of a whole, and your promises that you made stumping during the election are obviously things that are important to you, but if you can't do it because the Municipal Act says you can't do it because you don't have authority to do it, you can't bully staff into doing it, you can't bully one another into agreeing to do it, and you certainly can't bully the public into saying, no can do, not doing it. So the Code of Conduct is there to hold people accountable, but it's also there to remind people the creatures of statute that municipalities are can be changed, but until such time as they are, this council and this municipality can only do what's in there. And that's why we see private member bills and things changing over time, because members of the ledge go, well, you know, why can't they do this? Or how come a member of council can't you know, have some sort of an interest in the community? They've always believed in this and that. How come suddenly it's a conflict of interest? Wait a minute, they've always helped that group. So since they've always helped that group and it's so important to the community, what are you saying now that I'm a member of council, I can't help that group? You can absolutely help that group. But if that group is coming to council asking for a grant, there's a pecuniary interest. Is it going in your pocket? Absolutely not. But it is a financial interest of that body, and you are a member of that body. So continue to help your community, but for that issue, you can't participate in the discussion if the group is asking for money. And so these are these types of questions that the Councillor's Guide talks about, where people in the public and members of council say, but that doesn't make sense. I didn't run for office to not help that group. Continue to help the group. Member of council in another jurisdiction works with Communities in Bloom and has for years. And it's a passion of hers. And Community in Blooms came and said, listen, we'd like to do this, that, and the other in the summer to make sure that, you know, we bring people to your community. And this member of council said, absolutely, and I want to do this, that, and the other. But then the member of council actually, at council, spoke for Communities in Bloom. And a code complaint came forward. And to my regret, I had to find that this member of council had a pecuniary interest and should have declared and should not have voted. Does that mean that she's not passionate about communities in bloom and beautification and what the benefits of tourism and her participating? It just means you can't vote on giving money to a group you belong to. And that, again, is not what I'm saying. It's what the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act is saying. So again, clarity in your code and clarity to the public, so when these things happen, people don't think, well, why aren't you allowing members of council to help anymore? Because there's a pecuniary interest. And why aren't you allowing me to participate anymore? You can participate, but you can't vote when there's a pecuniary interest. So I would, encourage all members of council and members of the public who see these disconnects to take a look at some of the guidance that we get from the province with the municipal guide. Next slide, please. So I took this quote out of this particular judicial review of an integrity commissioner's decision. It's 2022, so it's pretty recent, just to really underscore that individual members of council, as passionate as they may be, cannot act outside of council. And when they do act outside of council and get angry at staff, there have to be clear rules that say that's harassment, that's intimidation, that's bullying. So the slide is taken from Villeneuve versus North Stormont. It's a judicial review of an integrity commissioner's code investigation. And what we saw in this integrity commissioner report to council was the applicant, so the person who brought it to the court to say the integrity commissioner got it wrong, council got it wrong, was that a member of council had used abusive language and tone. So I think what's really important about this particular, and why I'm bringing it up when we're talking about my proposed updates to your code, is tone was seen by the court as something that was contrary to the code. Well, what do you mean? Well, does the integrity commissioner decide how I get to raise my voice or speak? Apparently, if your tone is abusive, yes. And so this particular court said that during email exchanges, so abusive language, and during a council meeting, a particular member of council was abusive to the CAO in language and tone, and the code said that you cannot be abusive and undermine staff. So what I'm trying to point out here is, unless there is a rule that captures this behavior, members of council with good intentions ride roughshod over the professionals who are there to serve council. So can members of council ask questions? Absolutely. The code is not here to stifle you. Can members of council say, hold on a second, I don't think that you answered my question? Absolutely. Members of staff, I used to be a member of staff of the City of Toronto. One of your job description requirements is not to have thick skin, but most do, because they know that members of council represent the public, they're accountable to the public. So when those tough questions come, you've got to be able to be ready to answer them. What a member of staff is not there to be is a punching bag, to be abused verbally by tone or otherwise. And so the code has to set out very clearly, and I have enhanced that section of the code that deals with staff-council relations and the respect for staff, because staff can't come to work and be belittled and undermined and abused. And members of council can't come to council and be undermined and belittled and abused. And a deputant who comes to speak to you cannot be undermined, belittled, and abused. So we just need to be really clear, and that's why I've made these updates to your code, so that you get to do your job. And anyone who falls off the rails, there are code rules that address that. Next slide, please. We're almost done. Council staff relations. So I'm just sort of underscoring here that members of council, you can respectfully disagree. Nothing in the proposed updates that I have made and that I'm submitting to you says that a member of council can't disagree. You disagree on a matter before council and you were the one dissenting vote. You get to say that, because that's what you did. Nothing in the code says that once there has been a council decision, you all of a sudden have to say, yep, I totally agreed on that. But what you can't do is undermine the decision of council. So once the decision has been made, and remember, the Municipal Act says that an individual member of council doesn't have a role in statute. Once a decision has been made by council, you have to support, not agree, but support the decision of your municipality. And so the reason that I have built in social media rules in the Code of Conduct is what you don't get to do is say fine and then go off to Facebook and say what you may say. Because what you say in emails or Facebook or all the other social media that I don't have, what you don't get to do is what the code says you can't do here. What you don't get to do is send emails to people that take information that was discussed in a closed meeting. So whether you do it here or in person or in writing or in social media, the code that I am proposing that you adopt is saying you have rules that you have to follow, and that includes social media. Social media is fantastic because it's cold. And how do you want to, address people? People can't always come out. Thank you for coming out today. Your commitment to this municipality is very much respected. But sometimes you want to log on. And so there has to be a way to talk to people that's respectful, even online. And you can't, when you go into closed, take off your camera, take off your mic, and then go email someone. So there have to be rules that ensure that confidentiality, whether enclosed in person or enclosed electronically, members of council are not disclosing information that could harm the municipality. And so the reason that I made some of the updates include social media rules is because there are rules out there. The courts have said, this is what you can't do. So what if a member of the public bullies me and I want to mute them? There are decisions out there that say what members of council can do. First and foremost, you represent the public. So if a member of the public actually says something on your social media that you don't like, you don't get to mute them. Any more than if you're here in person and someone says, I don't agree with you, you have 5 minutes to say what you have to say. Don't insult anyone. Don't be spurless in what you're saying. Don't be discriminatory. But you can disagree with members of council. Your 5 minutes is up. You have to sit down. You can't call people names. You can't make false accusations. And you also can't do that online. So if a member of public says something discriminatory, harassing, threatens you, there are steps that you can take to block and to hide. These are some of the things I learned about social media. But you still have to allow them to interact with you unless they reach a point, and that's why I had to include language in the Code of Conduct. So not only do you have to govern yourself accordingly with social media use, but you are also protected if you are in any way harassed through social media. Next slide, please. So, guiding principles. We're getting to the good stuff here. So the guiding principles in the code, you'll see, and I have a hard copy here, and the guiding principles in most codes of conduct set out sort of some people call it the motherhood statement, some people call it the values statement. And what the statements of principles say is this is what council believes. And these are not substantive rules that you can breach, members of council, but these are rules that will guide your action, and these are rules that will guide my interpretation if there is a challenge to you through a code complaint. And those are found in Rule 1 of the updated code. So a code of conduct also has to have very precise language about how an integrity commissioner will view a code complaint. And I say this because I've received code complaints from other organizations where someone said, well, the member of council said something dishonest. Okay, so does every single word in the code of conduct have to have a definition set out in the code of conduct? No, absolutely not. You'd have a 400-page code of conduct. However, dishonest, lack of decorum, lack of dignity, all of these have nuanced meanings. So I tried to be fulsome in the principles piece. So if someone says, well, I think that member of council said something dishonest, or they say something, which they shouldn't, they lied. Well, there has to be something in the code that points to, and you would think, well, aren't all codes of conduct based on honesty? Are you telling me I have to put a rule saying you must be honest? Well, because there are different interpretations in law, we need commentary. And what I can't do is say, based on this code complaint, I think they meant this, and so I'm going to find you in breach of the code. So it may look as though I tried to sort of puff up this code, but again, what's it based on? It's based on my experience, it's based on court decisions, it's based on other integrity commissioners who've had problems where people have said dishonest, lie, untruthful, misleading. All of these sort of mean the same thing. So how am I, when I receive that type of code complaint, going to interpret it? Remember, it's about fairness. It's not about what I think. It's about you holding your council accountable, and they must be clear on what their obligations are. Otherwise, it's unfair to them, and it's unfair broadly. So dissent and passionate debate are allowed and not stunted by the code. However, unlike the federal and the provincial government where there are speakers, there is not a speaker except at the City of Toronto. So where there is a discussion at council, the behavior and the tone and the gestures are governed by the procedural bylaw. You have a procedural bylaw, and whoever is sitting in the chair of council or committee will make decisions on that meeting. Not the clerk, not the solicitor, but the chair of the meeting. If that comment or if that tone has been ruled upon at the meeting, but an individual feels they have been aggrieved to the extent that they believe there's also a code violation, there's concurrent jurisdiction. So what I've said in your updated code is procedural rules are governed by the chair in council or committee, including closed. However, if it is not addressed satisfactorily, or if there was no actual ruling, any member of the public, if it's a public meeting, any member of staff or any member of council can also bring that concern to the integrity commissioner. And that has to be something, I believe, that is clearly set out in your code. Next slide, please. So the role of the integrity commissioner. I really made updates to this portion of your code, and you will see as I go on to the last slide where those changes have been made, because the role of the integrity commissioner has to be clearly set out, what I can and cannot do. You also have an upper tier that some of you are part of. So what happens if you breach a code of the upper tier, but you are doing it in your representative role of an East Gwillimbury member of council? That's also in your updated code. Does the integrity commissioner provide you advice? Yes. I provide you advice on day-to-day situations as it relates to code rules, MCIA rules. I work with your staff. I receive information from the public, and I clarify what members of council are required to do under the code. I investigate. I mediate informal complaints, and I do training. Because if I'm supposed to be the subject matter expert, then I, from time to time, will come and do training for members of council. What I don't allow is for my office to be weaponized. And what I mean by that is absolutely every single person that comes through my door virtually, on the phone, email, in person, I give an ear, because that's my role. But what I won't do is allow any member of council, and I say this with the most respect, members of council, what I will not do is allow any member of council, because there is animus, I don't like you, or because we have a different political perspective, to use the code of conduct or my office. And yes, I get paid to investigate, so guess what? I'm not going to use your money to be the arbiter of infighting, That's not what I'm here to do. So what I try to do is mediate. And what I've done is put a very fulsome, detailed, informal complaint protocol so members of council and members of the public know if what you're looking for is a fight, that's not the intent of the code of conduct, and that certainly is not the role of the integrity commissioner. Will I attempt to assist individuals to understand what my role is, and will I try to mediate some sort of resolution? Because unhappy people doesn't sit well with me. But what I won't do is let this office and let this code be weaponized. And I invite you to just have a call me and ask me what I do. And if anyone has ever done that, they will know that I spend a lot of time talking to people, and I don't put on the ticker with the, here's how much I'm billing the municipality right away, because I need people to understand what I do. Then if there's an investigation, yeah, I'm gonna bill the municipality. I provide advice, I provide recommendations. I work with your staff to work on intersecting policies to ensure that there's social media policies, there's HR policies, what happens if there's a human rights or a discrimination allegation, how do I work with the Human Rights Department to ensure that we have a tiered approach. So there's a lot that I do, and I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just in my agreement with the municipality, I wanted to make sure it was in your code. Next slide, please. Enforcement and alleged contraventions of the MCIA. I won't read through this because I said I keep my promises, and I've actually gone over, so my apologies. But the MCIA is very specific. The Integrity Commissioner can only receive a complaint before 6 weeks. After that, I cannot receive the complaint. The complaint will then have to go to court, and I have to give reasons. So even if I find that the member has not breached the MCIA, I still have to give the complainant reasons and the member reasons. I may not publicly come to council, but I will put it up on the website because the Municipal Act and the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act require me to publish reasons. And in my view, publishing reasons has to be where people can see it. So it would be on the website. The second to last slide is where I just talk about provincial consultations in 2021 and in 2024. As I mentioned before, Minister Calandra has asked all municipalities to provide input on what they would like to see codes of conduct have, and if they think there should be stronger penalties, up to and including removal from office of a member of council, and we'll hear more about that probably in the next year. And the last slide, please. So this is where I feel like I should say, this is why I've brought the proposed updated code to you. And so what we have in this last slide is just my identification of where I've had enhanced input and detail that I've brought to council, where there's new information. And as you can see, these are the areas where I've put most of my my expertise and my work, because I feel there was not a complaint investigation process. So it was sort of like, let's talk about it. What did you do? Well, now these are the steps for an integrity commissioner to follow when she receives a code of conduct complaint. I have a social media insertion, traditional media and social media. Discrimination and harassment has been enhanced. Conflict of interest, there's a nepotism policy now. Everybody knows there's a municipal nepotism policy, but now it's embedded in your code for fairness. Confidentiality has also been strengthened. You cannot disclose, members of council, anything by any means that you received in closed session. It doesn't matter if there was a stamp that said confidential, if it was discussed in closed, even if you think it shouldn't have been discussed in closed, it was in a closed session and you don't get to disclose it by any means to anyone. That had to be really strengthened in your code, because a lot of times members of council go, well, that shouldn't have been enclosed. That's a decision of the municipality. If you believe it shouldn't have been enclosed, there's a closed meeting investigator who will investigate that complaint. What a member of council doesn't get to do if they believe that something shouldn't have been enclosed is say, I don't think it should have been enclosed. I'm going to say it anyway. That's a breach of the code. and that's a breach that I take very seriously because it undermines the municipality, puts at risk the municipality, and I have many cases that show that. So I want to ensure that the work you do is protected, and that's why I've made this recommendation about confidentiality. Gifts and benefits has been really bumped up because a lot of members of council receive things, whether they have a car wash sponsored by a ward councillor, or a bingo day, or an ice skate day. These are ways to work with your community, and that's allowed. I've given a quantum of $100. If you receive a gift, a T-shirt from an event, you don't have to declare it. If it's $100, you need to declare it. Like, what are you doing here? And if it's appropriate, and if you have given me the information and I see it's a way of engaging with your public based on the best practices out there, that's fine. Up to a quantum of $500. It's an arbitrary amount based on what's out there. And if you deem that to be too high or too low, give me the reasons why you think so. I'll definitely look at it. I'll definitely come back to you and say why I gave those quantums. It's important for there to be a declaration that is available from the clerk's office so individuals can see what you received from whom. And so these are the updates that I've submitted to you and proposed to you to have a more fulsome and efficient and clear and fair code of conduct. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to ask you to provide me questions if you have any, and I'll try to answer them. And if I can't answer them, I'll endeavor to provide written responses to all members of council so you're aware of what my answer is. So thank you for your time. I hope that I didn't bombard you too much with the first council meeting after the break, but this is an important document. I have spoken to all of you individually. I know how important this is to you. So I look forward to hearing any comments or input that you may have or feedback at this time or at a later date. Thank you.
Are there questions or other information that we would like to receive today? I see that Councillor Crone has his hand up. Go ahead, Councillor Crone. I'll take you first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to our presenter, thank you, Madam Craig, for an excellent presentation. I thought it was very informative, and thank you for everything that you do for our town. You made a couple of comments that I thought were you struck on something that I was concerned about. You mentioned at the beginning some might consider your role an expensive burden on the taxpayer. Well, much like that there was for a small number of egregious findings. Well, I think much like a traffic cop, even though there's not many speeders on your street, you're sure glad that the traffic cop is there. So I appreciate that you're there to help look after us and keep us on the straight and narrow. I am, and then you further commented about your position being weaponized because of animus or whatever reasons on council. And that's something that's very much been top of mind for me, because I do worry about your position being weaponized. And I know you do your best to segment the informal complaints from the formal complaints. So just out of curiosity, with all due respect to your revenue streams, what would an average formal complaint, what could it, just as a ballpark, an average, I'm not willing to hold you to this, but it's just out of curiosity, what would we expect as a formal complaint? How much would that cost? Thank you.
I'm smiling, not in any way thank you for your question through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Crone. I'm smiling because people always ask me that, and I went to the 2019 when there was the task force at the provincial level wanting to amend the Municipal Act, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, the Municipal Elections Act, and FIPA. And I accepted an invitation to go and speak to the policy committee. And members very, very abruptly said, so what do you charge? because there were some members of smaller municipalities who said, you know, maybe the City of Toronto can afford to pay this or that, but I'm Muskoka Lakes, or I'm, you know, I can't afford to pay those types of costs. So what I try to do, Councillor, and certainly the staff who engaged and saw my proposed contract will know, I have different tiers because I feel that either a retainer or an hourly that doesn't look at education versus an investigation versus advice on the phone isn't going to help anyone. So a lot of times I have said, you know, I have different prices. And if I have an informal complaint that is mediated, it could take, you know, a couple of meetings of an hour to 2 hours, and I have a reduced rate for informal mediated complaints, trying to get to a resolution, because I feel it's really not going to be in any way incentivizing to people to say, come speak to me, let's see if we can mediate this, and here's how much I charge. What I do, Councillor, is I let people know more or less how much time it's going to take. Your municipality knows what my hourly is for training, what my hourly is for formal investigations. I can't give you a ballpark figure, but let's just say it's a 3 or 4 hour task that I do where I'm talking to people on video. Based on my hourly, we're probably looking at about $700. But you know, that's 3 or 4 hours and research that I've also done. I don't have a big problem disclosing how much I make because I think I'm a statutory officer, and whether I'm working at a provincial ministry or at a municipality, there's a sunshine list, and the reason there's a sunshine list is to let the public know how much the municipality is spending. So suffice it to say, I'm probably giving you more information than you wanted, but suffice it to say that I'm very keenly aware of the scrutiny of my role, and I'm very keenly aware of the fact that people are not going to want to come to work with my office and hold members accountable if they think they are the taxpayers who are going to get the bill. So I guess my first answer to that is if all members of council just follow the rules, then you won't pay me anything. But where there is a need for review, I can tell you that I'm not the most expensive out there. I'm certainly quite fair, and I have different levels of billing for telephone calls. It's not the same as an investigation because I really want members of council to be able to pick up the phone and say, do I have a conflict of interest? And if you're going to be concerned that asking that question is going to incur huge amounts of money, you're not going to call me. To be clear, the Municipal Act is a law. Your code of conduct is a bylaw, so it is a law. And you are tasked as a municipality in upholding the law. And you made reference to whether it's police officers or firefighters. I would never put myself at that level. Those individuals risk their lives every day. But you don't look at the cost where there is a risk to the municipality if you don't have that service.
Okay. Thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, just to follow up, I appreciate the answer to that. I also wanted to comment that I really appreciated your words about staff and respect for staff. I think in these codes of conduct, staff sometimes get lost, and there's not the adequate appreciation for the work that they do. In my former corporate career, I was an executive, and we had to prepare quarterly for a board meeting, and I remember how stressful that was. You know, well, our staff prepare for board meetings, you know, twice a month at least, and I can only appreciate how stressful that would be. So I really do appreciate the comments you made about them. My last question is more of a request. Could you, just for the folks that are watching this on video or in the chamber, why would a council go into a closed session? What are the reasons why a council will go into a closed session? Because I think there's not a lot of understanding around that. So I'm hoping you could probably say it more eloquently than I.
Through Madam Mayor to you, Councillor. First and foremost, your clerk and your solicitor are subject matter experts on closed meetings. They are not your closed meeting investigator, but they are professionals who would be able to clarify why. But because I often, as part of an investigation, will have a member of the public or a member of council say, I believe that a member has disclosed information from a closed meeting. I will look at why the municipality went into close. So Section 239 of the Municipal Act actually talks about that the municipality, the default is meetings open to the public. And so Section 239, I'm reminding you that I don't have my glasses, so I'm squinting here trying to see, but I'm going a little bit by memory. Meetings open to the public, and it sets out the notice requirements, but then it says exceptions. And right in the statute, and remember, this municipal act is the book, is the word, is the law that sets the rules for the municipality and its actors. And so the exceptions, is Section 239, sub 2, a meeting or a part of a meeting may be closed to the public, and then it sets out the reasons why it may. Security of the property, personal matters about identifiable individuals, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land of the municipalities, so the Ontario Land Tribunal and litigation and planning issues. Labor relations matters, so if you're talking about collective agreements or negotiations, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before an administrative tribunal affecting the municipality, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privileges, matters in respect of council, board, or committees held under MFIPA. So there's actually a long list of exceptions to the open meeting rules, and that is why when the council goes into closed, there is a statement, council is going into closed for the purposes of discussing, it will give one of these headings. And the council has to ensure that the personal information about an identifiable individual or the land acquisition or the litigation privilege that your solicitor is giving you, etc., will not be compromised by it being in public. This is not a secrecy provision, but rather a protection of information that is not yours to share or information that is not yet ready to be shared.
Thank you. That's excellent. Back to you, Madam Mayor. No further questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor LaHaye, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Mayor. I have several questions that, in preparation for this meeting, they're high-level questions. They're questions that I think will benefit the information for members of the public, because this is all about education today. And I'd like to, it's good timing to follow Councillor Crone, because a couple of the topics touch upon items that he brought up with you. So the first is closed sessions. And in preparation for this meeting, I was doing some research and noted that some municipalities in Ontario record their closed sessions. And so I was wondering if you could instruct us as to what the benefits might be for a municipality to record their closed sessions, and if you are the correct person to follow up with if we feel that there's been any violations, potentially, of the Code of Conduct during a closed session. I'll leave that. That is my first question. Thank you.
Through the mayor to you, Councillor Leahy. Thank you for your question. This is one of those areas of intersection between the rules of the Code of Conduct and your procedural bylaw, and then the understanding of the rules of municipality going into closed session. Closed session recordings years ago was recommended by the Ombudsman of Ontario. It is problematic. I also work with the Association of Municipal Clerks and Treasurers of Ontario. I provide training twice a year to that organization. And many municipal clerks have, and members of council have a concern with recording of a closed session. So while the Ombudsman has made a recommendation that, you know, if a closed meeting investigator needs to know what was discussed to determine whether or not the meeting was appropriately held in closed, well, they can go and speak to everyone who was at that meeting, or they could take a look at a video recording. The problem with video recordings is how long they're kept according to retention schedules, the accuracy. Oftentimes, the closed meetings are held in a location where the audio is not fantastic, and there's a bit of a chill that sometimes is created with video recording of closed sessions, because the matters often deal with litigation, often deal with very sensitive matters. So it's my understanding that most municipalities do not record closed meetings. It's my understanding that they have various ways of capturing the minutes. That's certainly something that you can discuss with your staff. When a member of council believes that there was a code infraction in a closed meeting, it's like anywhere else where you believe a member of council believes that there has been a code infraction. What you do is you bring it to the Integrity Commissioner. What a member of council does not do, whether it is an open session or closed session, is say, I think you breached the code of conduct, and I think that that was wrong. That's not something that is open to any member of council. That is a determination that can only be made by the Integrity Commissioner. And it often sends a chill to open and frank discussion. So if there's a closed meeting, and if a member of council believes that something was said untowards at the meeting, just like an open meeting, they will speak to the chair, point of personal privilege, point of whatever your rules are, and the chair will rule on whether or not there has been a breach. And as I said earlier, there's concurrent jurisdiction with the chair of a meeting, whether it's in open session or closed session, and the Integrity Commissioner. So if the chair has to a member's satisfaction addressed the issue, it probably should not come to the Integrity Commissioner because the matter has been addressed. If the matter has not been addressed to the satisfaction, the member can bring a code complaint to the Integrity Commissioner. The Integrity Commissioner has access to all records and can speak to anyone, so I am able to receive information that was discussed in closed session.
Thank you very much. And through you, Madam Mayor, I have another question, if I may. Would you please clarify the difference between the Ombudsman and the Integrity Commissioner, and under what circumstances should someone approach you versus approach the Ombudsman? And who is our Ombudsman for East Gwillimbury or for all of Ontario, and how would someone contact the Ombudsman?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Leahy. The difference between the Integrity Commissioner and the Ombudsman, there is the Ombudsman of Ontario, and then each municipality may, should they choose, create the office of the municipal ombudsperson. To my understanding, there's City of Toronto and a couple of others, but it's not something that most municipalities have decided to do. And so the default is the Ombudsman of Ontario. The Ombudsman of Ontario is a different entity, and I can't speak for, I can just say that systemic issues at the municipal level, either as it relates to education or municipalities, or their different categories, are handled by the Ombudsman of Ontario. The Integrity Commissioner's role in statute is set out in Section 223 of the Municipal Act. It sets out what the Integrity Commissioner does, and first and foremost, she applies the rules of the Code of Conduct and investigates alleged contraventions of the Code of individual members of council. So the Integrity Commissioner deals with individual breaches. If you had a municipal ombudsman, they would deal with concerns about decisions of council or actions, omissions, or decisions of the administration, as you do not have a municipal ombudsperson, that may be received by the Ombudsman of Ontario. The Ombudsman of Ontario can be found on their website. Their contact information is there, and their complaint process is set out there.
Thank you very much. And through you, Madam Mayor, one more question with regard, it's a procedural question. So if a member of the public had a concern and they wanted to contact you or file a complaint, it refers to, in the updated Code of Conduct, a form, a town form that is to be filled out. And so I myself, I know I speak for others, sometimes it's a little challenging to navigate the town website. So should we be highlighting where that form is for members of the public, and also where declarations have been made about conflicts of interest, so that it's easily accessible?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Leahy. Absolutely. Many websites are difficult to navigate, not by any ineptitude of staff, but just because websites are difficult to navigate. There's a lot of information there, and it's often difficult to find it. That being said, I am proposing the updates to your code for clarity and transparency and the ability for people to hold members of council and local boards accountable. So once I have received any input from members of council on the proposed updates to the code, I will ensure that I work with staff, including those in IT, to ensure that there is a clear place for forms, for filing code complaints, for seeking informal resolution of code complaints, where declarations of gifts and benefits may be found, and any other reason documents if I do not find that a MCIA complaint is borne out. So my work is not done once I have completed the updated revisions to the code. The next step will then be to make sure that the forms are clear, they're in compliance with Ontarians with disability. It can be in printed form, or it can be uploaded and populated online. All of that information I will work with as a secondary step with your staff.
Thank you very much. Madam Mayor, through you, one last detail I neglected to mention in my previous question. So if a member of the public does have a concern, is it confidential to contact you and to file a complaint? Is that a confidential matter between you and the member of public? And does that apply to all types of complaints, whether pecuniary or non-pecuniary? What are the guidelines around confidentiality?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Leahy. So all communication with the Office of the Integrity Commissioner, whether it is about advice that I provide to members of council, whether it is a staff person looking for clarification on an issue, whether it is a member of public who would like information or wants to explore filing a code complaint, all of that is confidential. I am bound by Section 223.5 of the Municipal Act, which actually speaks to secrecy. The language in the Municipal Act says that the Integrity Commissioner shall keep secret all information that comes to her knowledge in the course of her duties. And so, yes, advice, conversations, emails, telephone calls, formal complaint, who the complainant is, confidential. I will let the member of council, and it is in the updated proposal of the updated code, that the Integrity Commissioner will receive and must know who the complainant is, but will not tell the respondent who the complainant is. That will cause somewhat of a chill. I will not disclose the name of witnesses. If a person calls me and says, I think that individual member of council has a pecuniary interest that they didn't declare, I am bound by confidentiality. I cannot share that they had that conversation with me. I can say to the member of council, I have an informal complaint, although MCIA complaints are not enforced informally. You have to file a formal complaint, but I can bring it to the attention of the member of council. I will not disclose who brought it to me, nor will I disclose the names of complainants. even when I bring a report investigation to council after having investigated, the name of the member of council is not confidential because you are acting in your professional capacity. The name of the member of the public or staff or another member of council who's filed the complaint will always be confidential.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Crothers, I believe you wanted to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And through you, I always try and approach policy by looking for what are we trying to solve for. And I appreciate that you've been very clear that the Code of Conduct policy is about holding members accountable. And I wrote down how you said that you're not here to be the arbitrator of infighting. And I think that's very important. This is about the big egregious complaints, not the small hurt feelings type. I just feel that we need to be really mindful, kind of bridging with what Councillor Crone was talking about the financial impact on the taxpayer when there is multiple complaints that aren't of that big ticket item type of complaint. At the school board, when we brought in an integrity commissioner, the complaint investigations cost tens of thousands of dollars by the time all the witnesses were interviewed, and you're worth every penny. So it's not that, it's when it's a small matter of behavior. So what I don't want to be digging the taxpayer to micromanage our behavior, settle petty grievances. So I'm looking for your advice on, is there a more cost-effective way for us to improve behavior or to deal with perceived slights that doesn't always have to go through an investigator, doesn't always have to go through you. At the school board, we had a informal procedure where you had to talk to the person first. You had to mediate with the chair of the school board, so that bring everyone together and try and resolve it internally before we went externally. It's just my experience that it can snowball. One person is aggrieved by something and they file a code complaint. That person's upset that they've had this complaint brought against them, so they file, and it just creates a toxic environment. So my question to you is really, if the purpose is to educate and improve behavior, is there a more cost-effective way that we should be doing that, again, specifically with these smaller behavioral type issues, obviously not the big ones with conflict of interest and that sort of thing?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Crothers. So I'm thinking, and I thank you for your question, and it's a very valid question. My thought is, what is small to one may not be small to another. I certainly feel, and I have asked for your feedback, that if you feel, and some municipalities have said, listen, the informal process must first be attempted before there's a formal complaint. There are a couple of municipalities who've just said that, whether it's for cost effectiveness or just because they want to have people get along in a way where they are accountable to one another, I don't know. So certainly it would be your prerogative if you determine that you would like a informal resolution attempted before a formal complaint is filed. It is not the best practice at the municipal level, and certainly I would not recommend it, but the code belongs to you, and you are accountable to the public, so you may choose to do that. Getting back to egregious versus small, I've had situations, not this particular municipality, where there have been small, consistent patterns of conduct that have led to the egregious. And so where a person is harassing, where a person has microaggressions, where a person has stage whispers, where they're at council and they whisper and say something that's quite egregious, but in that particular instance, it may be seen as minimal. I think it's important to know that my office can be approached, and you should have confidence or clearly set out that my steps should be attempt informal, here is what the code should say. First, you have to go and speak to the person. You have to try to resolve the issues, because I think the purpose of having an integrity commissioner is to allow individual staff members who may feel uncomfortable to say, this has happened 4 or 5 times. And in an isolated context, it may seem irrelevant, but it is causing me to not want to go to council. Or a member of the public may say, you know what, I want to come and talk to council, but each time I come, I see those members of council rolling their eyes. I don't want to do it anymore. So what my office and the existence of my office allows, and I reiterate that I think that if you believe and members of council believe there is utility in having a stepped process, absolutely. So I'm clear on what I can do and you are clear on what you can do. But I think it's really important for people to be able to come to me and for me to be able to say, this has happened a couple of times, and while I don't have own motion powers, I will go to the member of council and say, it's come to my attention that this is your action. I don't have a formal complaint, but let's talk about it. The individual doesn't want to come to you. They're intimidated by you. You may not be intimidating, but they feel intimidated. So maybe there's a way to do both, and that's why I'd like to hear your feedback.
Thank you, that's appreciated, and I can certainly see that when it comes to staff, too. I can really understand why. I think I'm just thinking about sort of best practices for life. If someone's offended you, you talk to them, or if you feel someone's stepped out of line, you talk to them. And I know we've all had conversations here with each other saying, you know, why did you do that? And sometimes when you hear the other side of it, you're like, oh, okay. And so I think it's more of a best practice for life rather than something that we want to codify in policy. So thank you for that.
Councillor Roy DeClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Ms. Craig, thank you very much for being here. I've been here long enough to remember being on a council where my colleague said that we didn't need a code of conduct at all. So I'm happy to see that not only do we have one, but that you're proposing one that's more robust. I had several questions, but I wanted to sort of work on some logistical questions. First off, the MCIA complaints, there's that 6 weeks, sort of, I'll call it the statute of limitations on a complaint. Is that in legislation? Is that why that's there?
Through the mayor to Councillor Roy DeClemente, yes, it is a statutory requirement. And the reason why a member of, so let me not be confusing here. So there has to be a time frame within which an individual can bring a complaint to the Integrity Commissioner. The MCIA says that a complaint must be brought within 6 weeks, but it also talks about when it's not coming through a code of conduct complaint or 6 weeks after it has come to the attention of an individual, which could be up to 6 years. So the important piece is to have a statute of limitations, as you want to call it, or a time limitation for code complaints. And based on that, the Integrity Commissioner may look to the language of the MCIA, which says 6 weeks, constructive knowledge or otherwise, and may be broadened based on her authority to be able to review it under the code. But in answer to your question, it's a statutory time limitation in the MCIA.
Thank you. And the other thing is that under the application section, you note that the code does not apply to the library board. Is there another statute or another piece of legislation that would apply to those trustees on our board?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, no. So a library board is a local board for the purposes of the Part 5.1 of the Municipal Act, but there's a carve-out as it relates to integrity commissioners that says the integrity commissioner is only responsible for these local boards, or rather not responsible for police services boards and the library board and what have you. And so those boards have to mirror the provisions of the integrity commissioner's role and create their own processes for ethical breaches.
Thank you. If I may, the Code of Conduct also references a document that's a council expense policy, and I'm unfortunately unaware of one existing in our municipality, and if we do have one, I think it would be, number one, worthwhile if we reviewed it, but secondly, that it may be helpful to append it to this document. I think the draft that you've given us linked to the other pieces of legislation, I think for the purposes of that accountability to the public, having it all in one place is helpful so that they can refer to those things there. I wanted to kind of also reference the concept of social media and the use of town resources, town email addresses versus personal email addresses. And the code references the official business of the town, or social media accounts that we use to conduct the official business of the town. I have always approached social media as not the official business of the town. In fact, it is, the town has official accounts. So the town has a LinkedIn account, the town has an Instagram page or a Facebook page. My role is to share that official information, but that when I'm engaging on social media, I'm engaging as an individual who happens to be a councillor, but I'm not conducting official business of the town. And when I am asked whether I had a political account or whether I have my personal account, if someone comes to me with a question about the town that I feel requires my attention as a councillor, I ask them to email me at the town so that I have the town email address and I am conducting business as a councillor through that email address. So I'm just wondering if you can help us navigate that, because I've seen the entire gamut of I've got a separate account and I'm collecting information about my constituents privately versus I'm conducting the business of the municipality, and I can't use those email addresses 4 years from now when I'm campaigning. And so I'm hoping you can help us navigate that a little bit better. It's not 100% clear for me in this code.
Yes. Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I don't believe that I can give a response that merits the importance of your question here. I have looked at best practices. Certainly the City of Toronto has a social media policy, and they have an appended document from the Integrity Commissioner of a couple of years ago. But even that document sort of says, these are the recommendations. This is an area that has not been given enough thought, and it always becomes a problem closer to election time. What comes to play is collection of information. Many members of council have been chatting with people, giving information on their personal social media accounts, collecting these emails, and then they become a candidate and they have all these emails. Or members of council have been doing what you have done, which is a best practice, and they have all these emails, but they say these individuals actually contacted me on my social media, then they gave me an email, so I'm going to use all these emails to sort of blast campaign information when the writ drops. These are issues that need to be addressed. I think what I've attempted to do, without confounding your staff too much, is say, here are what the best practices out there say. There are individuals who are more proficient in social media use than others, and that doesn't make it nefarious. The best practice is what you stated, but I have nothing to hang my hat on to say that's what it should be. So my hope is between now and the next election, I'll be able to hopefully get your input on this. If there's more I have to put in, I will. And then hopefully work with your staff to have a companion document that deals with social media at the municipality.
So it sounds like I hit on something.
You did.
Thank you. If I may, Madam Mayor, just one further. The definition for me, I know you were very specific in what you defined in the policy and what you didn't. For me, the definition of election activity or campaign activities was a gray area that I didn't see identified. For me, it's a challenge because there's that joke that exists out there, is that the day one of the campaign is the day after we're sworn in as councillors. And that's not actually the case. The case is that campaigns last from the nomination day to the day of the election. But as elected officials, our role is to continue to engage with our community, build our profile, and create a reputation for that accountability and for delivering and answering questions. So defining what a campaign activity is, I think, is really important, and how those campaign activities are resourced is also, I think, pretty key. We talk about what is the best use of our council expense budget, and how does that play into our role as elected official or as individual who wants to continue to be an elected official?
So I don't know if that was a question, but through you, Madam Chair, to you, Councillor, what I have seen in other municipalities, and I've actually done as Integrity Commissioner for other municipalities, is worked with, again, staff has so much on their plate that I certainly, my intent was not to create more. But what some other municipalities have is a councillor expense policy, which deals with what a member of council can use their expense budget for. For example, there are lots of other municipalities that have fridge magnets. They say, the day of the business cards has come and gone. There are other ways that I want people to be able to contact me, but is a fridge magnet a way of giving your business card and contact information, or is it the campaign has actually started the day after I'm elected? Those types of discussions are actually, thank you for coming. Those types of discussions should take place on a broader level with how you can use your budget. So another really good question, and one of the reasons why some of this has not been addressed is because I don't have anything to point to say there's the gold standard out there. So I look forward to your feedback, because it'll give me an understanding of what I have to put more into or what I have to work with your staff on.
Thank you. I think my question was more that if you could define campaign activities
I
for us.
can't.
So thank you.
But I think what I will try to do, through you, Madam Chair, is to put commentary. So pointing to activity that looks like this, or fridge magnets, or what have you, it's not defining it, but it's saying it includes this. And that might be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Councillor Carruthers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. That was something I had addressed to, or circled in the policy about official town business, and that was exactly the wording I wrote here. I don't use my social media for official town business. I direct people to email me, because then you have the record. It's also easier to forward that to staff for input. So my comment applies to not just the social media aspect of it, but other sections of this, where it would be nice to add some language that except as a member of the public. So in 5.2, for instance, it talks about not using town lands, facilities, equipment, supplies, and services, except for official town business. So would that mean I can't visit a park? Would that mean I can't use garbage pickup? These are town services that I use as a taxpayer, right? So I'm just wondering if we know the intent is that I'm not going to ask a staff member to print off invitations to a baby shower. We understand that's the intent, but I'm wondering if the language of it just needs to have some sort of clarity, that except as used by members of the public. So I can have a picture of myself in a town park, the same as someone else can have a picture of themselves in a town park. But I wouldn't be able to be there if I was mayor wearing the chain, for instance. So I'm just wondering if we could just have a little bit of clarity, and I'm wondering if that's the type of language we should be looking at.
Thank you for that. I can just give an affirmative to that. I will look to clarify.
Councillor Lahey, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Mayor. So with regard to an overall respectful working environment, also from a health and safety perspective, it says in 9.1 that the town's goal is to provide that healthy, safety, respectful work environment. But it says it's a goal. It doesn't state that it's their responsibility. So I would like to have some clarification on where the buck actually stops in providing a healthy, safe, and respectful work environment to avoid situations where individuals may feel uncomfortable being in meetings or in council chambers for whatever reason.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Leahy. So thank you for your question and input. A lot of this part of my updates, so some you already had, and some I have enhanced, which speaks to in compliance with the town's respectful workplace, in compliance with the Ontario Human Rights Code, in compliance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So many of these documents, these statutes or these documents or policies actually speak to what is disrespectful, discriminatory, harassing, pattern of conduct. So I'm loath to get too into the weeds in the actual substantive provisions of the code rule. What I try to do is point to that document, Occupational Health and Safety Act, where if there's a code complaint about unhealthy, unsafe, I would look to that document. But I understand if I'm trying to make this clear to you as members of council and clear to others who may want to file complaints who feel that there isn't a healthy workplace, what does that mean? So let me turn my mind to that and see if I extrapolate information from these documents, or if I, as I said to Councillor Carruthers, if I sort of, it wasn't Councillor Carruthers, it was Roy DiClemente, if I can actually say it includes these actions that may make a person feel unsafe. But I think, again, the more language I put into some of these, the less discretion I have, because it almost becomes it must fall into one of these categories. But if you're looking for clarity, Councillor, I understand that there needs to be clarity, and if it's not clear, I need to put more in, so I will turn my mind to that.
I'm not seeing any. Sorry, Councillor Johns, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Through you, actually, to our CEO for one question, then a follow-up. So do we have a councillor expense policy within the town?
Madam Mayor, I'm going to ask the treasurer just to speak to that briefly. Thank you.
So through you, Madam Mayor, there was a report that was done a few years ago that dealt with councillor expenses and what was considered allowable and what was considered not. You shouldn't be using. There's no official policy, but that report provides guidelines on how the expenses should be claimed.
Thanks, Mr. Marshall, and through you, Madam Mayor. I think I'm going to land at a question, but if you can just indulge me for a moment, Ms. Craig. So, one, I love the fact that we are expanding code of conduct. And as I look at the items, and I think from a kind of logistical perspective, like one of the things that we do as councillors, we would go to functions whereby we're representing the town. There is, so for example, the conservation dinner. It is a regular thing that councillors attend, but it is also a fundraiser for the Conservation Authority. And we use council discretionary budget to attend. And while you reference that in the code of conduct, if we don't have an expense policy that says it is okay to back up and support with the code of conduct, are we at a point where there is a concern of whether we are receiving a personal benefit for attending that dinner? So even though it is outlined in a code of conduct that it is perfectly okay to do that, we're actually using a budget with taxpayer funds with no policy around the expense. So it's almost like we have a document that says you can do this, but we don't have an expense policy that actually is foundational to the code of conduct or the line within the code of conduct. So I guess my question that I am attempting to land is it desirable for you with this code of conduct to have an expense policy that is foundational or supportive of your code of conduct?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Johns. Thank you for your question. What we have in Section 6.2 of the proposed updated code is the notwithstanding. So the default is members of council shall not receive a gift or benefit or hospitality that in their official duties unless, and then we have an exception, and one of those is found in sub F, food, lodging, transportation. So the understanding, Councillor Johns, is that as a member of council, you will attend functions, you will, in fact, participate where the attendance serves a legitimate business function. So there's enough language in here to be able to say, if it's not one of these exceptions, then it's a personal benefit, and so you have to declare it, and if it's more than 100 and up to 500. If it falls in one of these exceptions, it's part of your role as a member of council. How your activities are funded is a decision of the municipality. What your treasurer has said to me is there's a document that I can rely on when I am looking at the recommendations of staff of how and how much you should be spending. So I don't know that there needs to be a policy. I can certainly rely on that document, and I have sufficient verbiage in the proposed updates to be able to say you're actually within your realm as councillor, and here's the document over here that says this is how it's paid for. I don't know that I would have a difficulty with that.
So in a follow-up, I guess if I could ask our treasurer to circulate those recommendations as part of this process that we're going through, that would be appreciated.
Other questions, comments? It appears that we've come to the close end. I'd like to thank you very much for being here today with us. We appreciate you attending and have given all of us food for thought, both elected officials and staff as well. So thank you very much appreciated at this time. And I just will do some housekeeping here that if I could have a mover and a seconder to receive today's presentation, Councillor Crothers, Councillor Crone. Councillor Crone. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Now, are there any other questions to finish off today? I'm not seeing any at this time. Yes, go ahead, please.
I believe Ms. Craig is...
Sorry, thank you, Councillor John. Madam Mayor, I don't know what the protocol is. I would encourage members of council to field questions to me. And as I said, I've written as much as I can and will get back to all members of council on my answers. If there are additional things that come to mind, please send me those, and I will respond to those to all members of council before I finalize the document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you to do so. Thank you very much. And with that, could I have a motion to adjourn? We are at item F, confirming bylaw. Be it resolved that the bylaw 2025-001, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special meeting of municipal council held on January 14th, 2025, be taken as read, enacted, and signed by the mayor and municipal clerk. All those in favor? Oh, Councillor Crothers, Councillor LaHaye, all those in favor? And that's carried. And we will adjourn at 12:14. All those in favor? Mover and seconder, Councillor Crothers, Councillor Johns, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. It's been a long day, but very, very important for us. Thank you very much.